Hey, welcome, welcome. Claire Wasserman here. Guess what this is? This is the launch of something that I'm hoping could become really, really big. Not to put any pressure on myself or us, but the idea is, gosh, we all need just to remember we're not alone in this chaos called life. And a way to do that is to have a daily check in. Okay, so I'm committing for the next 90 days Monday through Friday at this time and wherever I am in the world. I could be here at home. I could be possibly at a doctor's office later this week because I'm getting knocked up. We'll have more on that soon. But the commitment is noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time, a time for us to come together and say, we got this. Let's reconnect with ourselves, with each other. I have stories on stories to share with you about my life, about the community, things I've learned running this business. Not only stories of mine, but stories of yours. I want to share what you're all going through. Yay, Teresa, I can see you there. Good. I've never done a simulcast live. So this should technically be on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. Later on, maybe we'll cut it into a podcast, who knows? But let me just give a quick introduction of myself and kind of the structure of what these sessions are about. And then I'm going to go into today's topic, which is a very, very, very personal one. It is about my existential breakdown during COVID, which perhaps sounds familiar to you all, because I think many of us experienced our own moment. And by moment, I mean possibly 2 years of moment of questioning what the fuck is happening. Not just what the fuck is happening in the world, but who am I in this new world? Really want to dig into it because these daily check-ins are about just radical transparency from me. And if you want to be honest about what you're going through too, jump in the comments. The best thing you can do for another person, I think, is to show them that they're not alone. Okay. And a way to do that is by saying, me too, whatever it is, the messiness of whatever it is just a profound fucking thing. Yes, I curse. If that's a problem, earmuffs for the kids. But sorry, not sorry. Okay. So first, who am I? If you're new to this, I founded Ladies Get Paid in 2016. It was really my response to just utter and total frustration and anger around the wage gap and the leadership gap and all the gaps when it comes to men and women and money. And we are so far from parity. And so the question, of course, was, what do you as an individual do to combat something so systemic? What can you do short of quitting your job and becoming an activist? Like, at the time I loved my job. I didn't want to start Ladies Get Paid. I was hoping somebody else would, Um, so yeah, let me first, before I get into the Ladies Get Paid story, I want us to all just take a collective breath together because this is the time, this is the day. Every day we're going to check in at this time. And I want to do just a little meditation for a quick second here. So the best thing that I find in meditation is to remind myself that I am not the only one holding myself up, that the universe has got you. And here's how you can do it. Get comfortable in your seat or sit down if you're not, or if you can, if you're walking down the street, maybe don't sit down. Okay. When you sit, can you truly feel how the ground is lifting up to support your feet? Or are you so focused on the sensation of your feet on top of the ground? No, let the ground rise to meet you. Okay. Same thing, wherever you're seated, right? You have the sensation of your butt in the chair, but wait, what about the chair holding up your butt? Okay. Really allow yourself to be supported by what is around you. What about the sensation of your arms in the air? Okay. So far, we're always so focused on our body, but what about the air supporting our body? Okay. Right. So just let for a moment, suspend yourself, just let yourself be and float and really absorb what it feels like to just let the fuck go. The ground will always be there to catch you. Your chair will always rise to hold you. And the air, it can feel almost like thick if you allow it to. Okay. People are like, I'm dropping off this. This is way too woo-woo. Don't worry, guys. We are going to go through the spiritual, through the scientific, always radical transparency, definitely cursing. So happy to see lots of familiar faces here and new ones as well. By the way, use this as an opportunity to network with each other. The community is amazing. And I'm not just saying that because I helped create it. All right. Like you all give to me just as much as, I'm giving to you. So do that for each other. Drop your LinkedIn's or say, hey, listen, I'm looking for work, or I have a company and I'm selling something. Like just go and sell yourself. Ladies get paid. We need to be paying each other, right? If not us, who? So use this as a time. I'm like shouting into a microphone. Okay. All right. So let me tell you now. These dailies, what we're going to be doing is I'm always going to pick a theme of a story that I'm going to share, probably, come from my personal life. Usually it'll be a wild story. But then I'm going to ask you all to submit your stories. And right now, there are a number of topics that we are looking for you to send us your stories. They can totally be anonymous, by the way. I'm not asking anyone to show their face or come up here on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. Like, I'm putting myself out there. That's because this is my job. But what I want to hear from you is that honesty. So let me tell you the topics that we are looking for stories. And then I'm going to get into my own in just a minute. And then how you can get in touch with us. I'm looking for stories related to getting fired or losing your job, because I got some good ones to share with you about my own journey. Salary negotiation, always. If it worked for you, if it didn't, what happened? Okay. Burnout, experiencing burnout. I want to hear those stories. How about learning to embrace your worth and then knowing what to charge for it? Your relationship with money. Okay. Of course. How about aha moments? Learning to trust your intuition, right? I want to hear about those times when you had a gut feeling and you listened to it and what happened. Or maybe you had a gut feeling and you didn't listen to it. Then what happened? Next, mantras, affirmations, and talismans. What are the things that keep you going, right? If you have a Post-it note that you look at every day, or in our last job seeker support group, Jessica had a little drawing that her daughter made for her, right? I want you to share that, post it online. Okay. And lastly, dealing with debt. Now, those are a lot of topics. If you want to review what we're looking for in terms of stories, just go to ladiesgetpaid.com, check out our blog, and you'll see I just posted both the list of topics of stories and how to get in touch with us. So hello@ladiesgetpaid.com. And also we have a phone number now. Well, it's a Google voicemail. We want to hear from you. So check that out. Okay. So I'm going to use our time. Oh, and if you're curious how your stories are going to be used, first of all, anonymous. Second of all, they may be used as blog articles mentioned during these lives, or part of an upcoming podcast. Stay tuned for that. So again, it's anonymous, but the whole point in soliciting your stories is to show other people that they're not alone, because that's really was the genesis of Ladies Get Paid. And let me actually just kind of go through the genesis of Ladies Get Paid. I mean, figuring that this is the first check-in that we're doing, great place to begin. And then I'll get into the theme of today, which was actually about what happens when you lose sight of who you are and how do you reinvent yourself. Okay. But the story of Ladies Get Paid really began in 2015 when I was the director of marketing at a company called workingnotworking.com, which helps connect creative freelancers for work. And I, at the time, would not have considered myself a feminist at all. If you had asked me if I were a feminist, I would probably have taken offense. Complete and total misunderstanding of what the heck feminism was. I assumed it meant I had to be a man hater, or, all these bad stereotypes, but just didn't consider myself a feminist until something happened that woke me the F up. And by F, of course, I mean feminist. No. Cuban sandwich. Good to see you. Okay. So what happens is I am invited to the Cannes Lions Advertising Festival, not the film festival. There's a advertising festival in the south of France every year, and Working Not Working sent our team to go and try to find clients, right? Companies who would pay us to recruit, help connect talent for them. Walk into my first party there, and an older guy comes up to me and he smiles and sticks out his hand and says very innocently, "Now, whose wife are you?" A lot of you may have heard this story before. Whose wife am I? I mean, certainly not his. Jesus. I was so taken aback. And I don't know what I said, but whatever it was, it definitely was not an insult to him. I was so concerned with making sure that he didn't feel uncomfortable, right? And it just set the tone for a full week of constant interactions with men who just did not take me seriously. I mean, everything from not giving me eye contact. Like I would be in a group of men. By the way, this is not meant to be any kind of like man-hating session right now. I just want to tell you how like the fire was built that then I turned into fuel to start Ladies Get Paid. But all week, I'd be in a circle of a group of people, and if there were, it was mostly men, and they would all look at each other, shake each other's hands, and not even shake my hand. Like, what? If you touch me, like you're gonna like, I have no idea actually. I'm like, are you religious? Like, what is this? Or would be about how, oh, I'm so hot, or talking about how they wanted to fuck some other woman. And I was in a conversation with Marilyn goddamn Manson, and he was talking about some chick he was trying to bone, and I'm standing right there. And I'm realizing this whole week, I can't speak up, or didn't feel like I could, because we were there for business, right? We needed to find clients. So if I were to ever, quote, call somebody out, that could be at the potential expense of my job. I mean, there were real consequences to this. I mean, at the end of the day, what this is a gender power dynamic, right? There's an imbalance to it. And it's, when you're in a junior position, there are a lot more things you got to consider. I wouldn't say a lot more, but I would say different things that you need to navigate than if you are in a position of power. Okay. And what I did was nothing. I just kind of smiled and made jokes. And, again, my first priority was, how could I make you all feel comfortable about this? But what was the toll that it was taking on me? And by the end of that week, I was utterly exhausted, and not just exhausted, but really kind of disgusted. But here's the thing, I wasn't disgusted so much at the men as I was disgusted at myself, because anytime that I was objectified, I immediately internalized it as, well, this must be my fault, right? I mean, I'd even been told early on in my career, oh, but you're so friendly. One man tried to kiss me, and he was married, by the way. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? He goes, but why did you give me your business card? Right? I mean, there are these signals over and over again, some obvious like that, others more subconscious, that do tell us it is our fault, right? And also, I do think, and not to generalize too much here, but I think women are really, really good at self-reflection. This is a beautiful quality that we have, right? But what can happen with self-reflection? Spiraling, self-blame, right? I'm seeing those hearts on Instagram. Jump in on LinkedIn too. Put your comments if this is resonating with you. So I'm spiraling that this is my fault, okay? And the only thing I know how to do is, let me just write it out. I want to just, because this is how I figure out what's going on in my life. I can't do it in my head. It's too complicated. I have too much happening there. I really need to just journal. And so I'm writing out my experience of all the various sexist things that I experienced during that week, and then me trying to process it, right? And seeing how much self-blame was happening. And also recognizing that in so many ways, big and small, I had been navigating these uncomfortable gender power dynamics throughout my career, but never once called it out. And I don't even mean calling it out to anyone else. I mean admitting it to myself, right? Because who wants to admit that there's bad shit going on, right? Like, we don't want to be the victim. We don't want to blame people. We're busy. We're ambitious. Like, I never wanted to stop and say, this stuff is shitty. Like, I was constantly looking for ways to win, which is a great quality to have. But when you don't stop and actually take stock of the bullshit that you experience, then you can't really give yourself credit for it, right? That you're strong enough to go through it. Also, what is good and hard, but good about reflecting on all the shittiness that you experience is you can really see the consequences. What has this done to you? Again, and, in small ways, compounded over time. And a really big thing I saw as I journaled about the sexist experiences that I'd had throughout my career, and more specifically, just navigating uncomfortable gender power dynamics, is I realized that I had been spending so much extra energy. And in that extra energy, I was not giving that back to myself. I was not giving that back to the world. Think about all of the energy that we may have wasted. Actually, I'll never say wasted, because you know what? It's not a waste if you then acknowledge it and then use it. Think about the energy we've wasted beating up ourselves over our fucking bodies. I'm just going to speak for myself, because that, if you want to know the real genesis of Ladies Get Paid, It wasn't even about the wage gap. It was about the energy I'd wasted hating my body. Wow. And I thought if I could, and unpaid labor, huge energy, right? So hating my body or questioning myself, or if somebody hit on me, and said, well, you were smiling or gave me your business card, me thinking, oh, it's my fault. All of that energy, what could I do with that energy if I hadn't spent it on that fucking bullshit? Okay. Even if you just put it in hours, it's going to make you cry because you're just like, all right, if every day I calculate how much of my inner voice is beating myself up in some capacity, and let's just say it's most of the day. So out of, the 16 hours I'm awake, would you say 15 hours is spent having some kind of dialogue with yourself? Let's even just break it down further. Maybe you spend 1 hour a day looking in the mirror and not liking your body or beating yourself up over a mistake. If you take that number and you calculate it every day and you put it towards your dreams or your goals, wow. Kind of like looking at how much time we waste on social media. You know how many hours on my end? I'm going to be, this is, again, honesty. This is what we're doing here in daily lives. I'm being very transparent with you in the hopes that this makes you feel less alone and you be transparent with me and we can really help each other. 5 hours a day, I got an alert that I am spending loitering on social media, not creating content, not doing this, just scrolling through, most likely Scandival, which I'm okay with. But I'm not okay with the 5 hours when I look at what could I have done with those 5 hours? How could I have given myself like something to be better in this world, or things that I could give to you all, or time I can spend with my lovely wife and cat. And we will try and go and find Phoebe Cat in a minute and then bring her in here for an appearance because I've gotten some requests for that. But yeah, when you really look at the energy wasted beating ourselves up over this stuff that we could be using to better ourselves in the world, ooh, the fire was lit. For me, that fire was, honestly, it was just Googling women in the wage gap. I knew nothing. This was 2015. If you'd asked me what is the wage gap, I don't think I could have told you. In my defense, a lot of people didn't in 2015. Yes, I'm seeing some comments. I never stopped thinking about my energy and time waste in those situations. Correct. So as I'm Googling women and the wage gap, women in the workplace, I am utterly astonished by how far away from parity we were. I knew that men and women, like we weren't, quote, equal, but I mean, the fact that Hispanic women were making 55 cents to the dollar compared to men, I think they're up to 60 cents now. Woohoo. Whoa, there was no justification for this. And so then the thinking was, all right, it's not just me. It's not just me. Like these issues I'm experiencing, there's statistics that back them up. This is systemic. This is overwhelming. And what do I do as an individual? Right? How do I begin on Monday? I'm not going to quit my job. In fact, everything I've written about my experience navigating, my own gender power dynamics, I don't have the guts to share that with anyone. So do I just accept this? And in future lives, I do want to tell the stories and hear from you all of times in your life when you've learned something or experienced something that there then becomes like a before and after, right? This is like before Christ or after Christ. Like, there is no going back. There's no unseeing it, right? Like you are now presented with new information about yourself and the world, and you got to do something about it. But what do you do? Nothing is what I did for a full year. However, there was one thing that I did that if I had to pinpoint the genesis of Ladies Get Paid, it is this, and it is very much related to what we are doing now today. So all of that journaling that I did about the sexism that I experienced and trying to process it and recognizing that my default was to, self-blame, I decided to actually share it with a few friends. Like I was not going to publish it publicly. But I did share it. I shared it with some male friends too. And I just was like, here's my experience. And the emails I received back, I mean, this was pre Me Too, because again, this was 2015. They were like, holy shit, me too. And they asked permission to share my essay with their friends. And I started getting emails from people I didn't know saying, oh my God, me too, me too. Again, and I just want to underscore, it wasn't about, this is sexism, men suck. Like none of that. It was really about what are like the components of a gender power dynamic and when there's an imbalance and the contortionism, the dance, the people pleasing that we then play, right? It was a much more interesting sort of thought process around it. And the reason I bring this up is what it showed me was that I was not alone. And in that realization of not aloneness, it's what gave me the courage to keep figuring this stuff out. So, again, when I say I did nothing for a year, I did a lot of thinking, did a lot of reflecting on a failed startup that I'd had years earlier, which I'll talk about in another live about what I learned in, having a company that didn't work. It was a year of letting the energy fester, right? The fuel, the fire, it was building my desire to want to rectify gender power imbalances and more specifically support women so that we stop wasting our energy on bullshit. Fast forward 1 year, a friend of mine who was a really talented art director, is a very talented art director, came to me and she said, Claire, I just found out that I am charging so much less than my male counterpart. She was an art director, right? So for her, this was not a wage gap imposed by anybody else because she's a freelancer. She was determining her rates. No. The fact that her inclination, her, again, kind of default was to charge less than men who were on her level or, quite frankly, not as talented. So the issue was twofold. Number one, she didn't have the information. She's like, I don't know what to charge and where to find that out. And then the second part was working on her, obviously, inner value, right? Learning to value herself more and then figuring out how much to charge. And this was now, I think, 2016. And she came to me. And when she told me this, that was the real aha moment of Ladies Get Paid, because I realized the tangible way an individual can seek to close the wage gap is by beginning with themselves. It is by beginning with negotiating their salaries. It's beginning by having a healthier relationship with money. Wow. I brought 100 women together. And again, in future lives, we'll talk about, how I did this, but 100 women in this small apartment in New York. And I said, let's talk about money. It was not a panel discussion. I didn't want experts. It's a privileged conversation to have, right? I felt like what would be more profound would be a peer-to-peer experience where we could really share what we're going through and then take bits and pieces of each other's lives and make it, work for ourselves. And so I did it in a town hall format. Again, go into that in more detail in future, how to construct an event that's engaging, because it was like nothing I'd ever experienced in my life. And I think honestly, for a lot of the women there, it was like a champagne cork going off, because the minute you say to the room, tell me about your relationship with money. What does money mean to you? Yeah, there were tears for sure. But you know what there also was? Not just people crying about the wage gap. There were women who were crying tears of joy saying, I just want to tell y'all that I make a shit ton of money. I make a shit ton of money and I'm not embarrassed to say that. And everybody cheering, because it was profound to hear a woman be celebrated for her wealth. So it was just mind blowing. And when I walked out of that experience, a girlfriend of mine pulled me aside and said, you should do this. Like, this is what you should do. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. She goes, me neither, but this is what you should do. And I took her words to heart. I think about them almost every day, because this, right? It was facilitating conversation. It was bringing women together around themes that we struggle through and doing it in a way of, vulnerable intimacy, honesty. Like there was energy, humor, right? And I thought to her, you're right, I should do this. And the quote, this is going to evolve over time, and it's one foot in front of the other. And for me, that one foot next step was creating a Slack group, right? Hey guys, come and join the Slack group. And I did a bunch of themes based on things that had come up during that town hall. I had no plan to do another event or quit my job or dedicate my life to this kind of work. That town hall experience was the first time that I had ever spoken on the proverbial microphone. I say proverbial because it was an apartment. There was no microphone. But I had been the one behind the scenes writing the scripts for my bosses. Like, it was never me in front of the camera, really. This was new. But what I knew how to do best was one foot in front of the other. How do we continue the conversation? And then as folks are talking, I can learn, I can see more clearly what this is going to be. And it took off from there because in looking at Slack, I could see all the very specific questions, the education that women needed, not just wanted, needed, right? And then found coaches to host negotiation, workshops. It was all in person, obviously, and continued every month to host a town hall on a different theme related to work, life, or money, where there could be that peer to peer sharing. And then later on, we'd have a workshop that was very specific to learning tangible, actionable steps, right? I like to say, what can you do on Monday? Because I'm kind of sick of the whole let's just get inspired. It's like, okay, well, what do we do with that inspiration? Right. And it blew up. It really did. I mean, we've got now 75,000 women from all 50 states, more than 120 countries. They've exchanged almost 3 million messages in that Slack group. Lots of stuff, lots of stuff. But that's not what I was going to talk about today. I did feel like in the opening of our daily check-ins, it's good to kind of lay the groundwork of like, who the heck am I and what does Ladies Get Paid and how did this start? But the reason I'm doing these lives is really because I lost myself during the pandemic. My therapist is a little bit, I don't want to say hesitant for me to share all this, but she was like, just be sure that you're okay with, like, I'm going to just be really honest with everybody here about what I went through during the pandemic. Again, in the hopes that, if anyone else also felt like they lost themselves, and, is struggling to make a comeback into whatever this new normal is, you are not alone. I will share with you how I pulled myself back up out of basically 2 years of doing just depression. So here's what happened. Let me take you back to 2019, October, New York City. We had a conference for 1,000 people. Anyone go there? Was anyone there? It's called Get Money, Get Paid. And it was amazing. I mean, shout out completely to my wife and co-founder Ashley, because she organized the whole conference. And we felt like, all right, we've made it. I mean, we lost some money on the conference, but we have established our brand and it's only upside from here. Ha ha ha, right? How many of you all felt like right before the pandemic happened, like this was your year? Well, actually, in a way, it kind of was our year because it was a year of reset, of learning, right? So yeah, I was there. Good. I'm seeing my mic is not working. I mean, okay, hopefully it's working now. Yeah, so this conference happens. I get a book deal. I'm going to be doing these lives every day. So I'm going to go into more detail about how I got the book deal, writing the book, and that whole process. But point being, right before the pandemic hit was our freaking year. Okay. All right, the pandemic happens and we are a completely in-person business. Everything we did was in person. I'd used Zoom before, but like we did not use virtual at all. So there was that. Also, we had made a decision that most of our money, we were not going to rely on our community to give us because we wanted to keep things, ticket prices very low, right? So we could be as inclusive as possible, grow our community. So where was the money coming from? The money was coming from brands, okay? Brands who wanted to sponsor our events. So now the pandemic happens, there are no events, and guess whose budgets were the first to be cut? Marketing, right? Not only that, we had signed a contract with a major brand, which shall not be named. They reneged. Huge contract. And they go, actually, no, give it back. Long story short, they had already signed it and there was no force majeure clause in it. So kept the money, and all is fine. But point being, we are at a massive crisis point here where we're like, we're going to go out of business. But then I thought, what is the definition of a business, right? Like how do you know if you even have a business versus like a project? Okay. Well, a business is if you exchange of goods and services. If you provide something that another person is willing to pay for and your operational costs are less than, you have a good margin, you have a business. So the way that we were running our business at that time, with it being in person, heavily reliant on brands, no, that was not going to work anymore in the pandemic, right? So in that regard, the business was dead. So what was the goods and services that we could provide that people would be willing to pay for? Was there a need for what we could do? And what we can do is we can bring women together to support each other, to find work, to feel better, to do more. Okay. It's still education. It's just in a different medium. So we pivoted to online, right? Virtual. Okay. Virtual. And then in being able to do more events quickly, we could then build up a video library. right? Or where you could then maybe pay a subscription fee to get access to the video library. So it would be more money for us, but actually more value for you because it's cheaper to buy access to hundreds of hours of videos than to pay one at a time, right? Anyway, long story short, it actually felt like things were okay in the beginning of the pandemic. Like I felt like I had purpose. I was hosting weekly Friday lunches for people to come together. But the issue, though, with jumping in, so survival mode is basically what we were in. The issue, though, when you jump into survival mode is you are not giving yourself time to process trauma. And somebody said this so beautifully the other day. They made the point of if you lose your job, I know your initial instinct is going to want to be, let's get another job. It's to move as quickly as possible, right? Again, survival mode. But when you jump from one thing to the next so quickly and not giving yourself time and space to actually fucking grieve the ending of the job or life before the pandemic, it's not like that grief and that trauma goes away in your survival mode. It just gets stuffed down. Like your body knows. Your body knows. Now, again, needing to move quickly, survival mode. We got to keep the business afloat. I'm somebody who's like extremely positive. Let's always look on the bright side. Where's the silver lining? Again, it's a beautiful quality to be that kind of person as I am, but it's also an avoidant tactic of not wanting to feel your feelings. And again, if you don't feel your feelings, they don't go away. What happens? They just get stuffed down further. I would say for the first year of the pandemic, I felt no grief. I was numb, honestly. I felt out of body is what happened. It's like I knew there was a pandemic happening. I knew there were horrible things happening to our business, but I just compartmentalized the shit out of my life. It was like I put a box around any kind of connection to my soul, right? Because if I were to really connect with myself, then I might feel the grief of life being different, right? And all the things happening in our community too, not just our business, but the real women in the community losing their jobs, suffering through the pandemic. I didn't want to. I have a propensity to take on other people's stuff, right? Because I want to help. But I knew in this moment I had to protect myself. But in that self protection, really walled off that, like I said, connection to who I am. And so now we're into the second year of the pandemic. I had a total existential crisis. Even though my book came out, I accomplished this big thing, I felt like I didn't do it. I felt like I didn't know ladies get paid. I would look at beautiful things people wrote me and just be like, I don't know who they're talking to. And it really, quite honestly, scared me that when an external thing happens, that it could shake my internals to such a degree that I didn't know who I was. And in not knowing who I was, I couldn't get motivated at all. I was taking naps like you would not believe. Also, we moved from New York to LA, which added to that as well, right? So just like taking ourselves out of the sort of adrenaline of that city. And I'd lived in New York for a decade. I'm coming to like this beautiful place, sunshine, so I had a good time at first of like, let's take naps, let's relax, let's treat myself. But in doing that, I then could not get myself back to work. And that's shitty for everybody, but even more so when your co-founder, your partner is also your wife. So this is hurting her career. It's hurting our business. It's hurting our relationship. It's hurting our future. And the only way I could think to motivate myself, or I guess kind of like the default motivation that I was familiar with, was the inner critic. How many of you all, that's how you tend to motivate yourself, is like, does your inner critic, it sounds like a drill sergeant, right? Like boot camp. It was like, come on, Claire, get the fuck out of bed. You got your nap time. Let's start working. People are waiting for you. They're suffering. They need your help, right? And it never stuck. That motivating was not working. And I realized that's when I had an aha moment, which was, wow, my predominant voice throughout the day is a bitch. I actually call her Hildebeest. I have a nice relationship with her now. We're going to talk about this in future check-ins, future lives, about how do you shift that inner voice from critic to champion. But it was realizing that my mode of self-motivation did not work anymore. It was not happening with nope. Well, what was going to motivate me? I had no idea. Well, crap. So let me tell you a little bit about what I did. I figured, you know what? Let me try to talk to people who reinvented themselves, who was living their life in a certain way. Something happened, either externally or maybe they had some kind of internal shift, and they made a conscious decision. You know what? I don't want to live my life the way that I was living before. I need to make some changes. I wanted to know, what are the elements of making change, right? And it's not just habits, right? Like, I'll share with you all the books I read, and James Clear, definitely one of them, that was really, really helpful. But for me, I don't like to jump right into books. I like to connect with people, in my community and ask them, right? How did you reinvent yourself? Um, and, and where do you begin, right? And also, there was a quote that I had put on my Facebook back when Facebook first came out. And I, for whatever reason, really loved it, but never kind of stopped to analyze why and what it meant. So I'm going to read to you what that quote is, because it really became this kind of clarion call. Love that word, which may just realize sounds fairly narcissistic that I love the word clarion. Okay, Claire. All right. This quote is this. It's by Howard Thurman. Don't ask what the world needs. No. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs are people who've come alive. Woo, I have goosebumps. So I was always just instinctually attracted to that quote, but had never questioned, what does aliveness mean? Like, what are the elements to creating an alive life, right? Like, you hear these quotes, they sound really good, they give you goosebumps, but like, can we actually apply them practically to our lives? And not just our lives, but like, on Monday, what am I doing, right? And so I became obsessed with trying to deduce down, what are the elements of an alive life? Knowing what the kind of like, I was thinking of it sort of like the periodic table of elements, right? Or Abraham Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like self-actualization. How do you actually get there? And in figuring that out, I really had to dissect, my life, everything I'd done to get me here, but also other people's lives. What had they done to reinvent themselves so that they could be more, quote, alive in their life? I define aliveness, I think it's just being present. Like, that you are fully in the moment of whatever this experience is, and then taking command of that, making a conscious choice. If you in this moment feel very anxious, you can actually choose to no longer be anxious. There's a series of ways that you can do this: getting into your body, reframing how you're looking at it. Like, and in other lives, we're going to go way more into depth into how to actually do it. But again, the recognition of life is lived in the moment, and you making a conscious choice of how you want to relate to that moment. Ah, brilliant. So I go down this path of finding people who have reinvented their lives. And I talk to some amazing women, some of whom I'm going to be bringing up on these lives to share their stories with you. These were women who had every reason to just give up and say, you know what, life sucks. It is what it is. I've got the cards too much stacked against me. I've got 4 kids, one, with health problems, and a terrible divorce, and I'm coming out as a lesbian. Oh, and I want to now get out of the army and become a lawyer, right? That's expensive. Another woman who, was working in hospitality at a restaurant. I don't remember if she was turning 40 maybe, or, she was just like, I can't be working at restaurants anymore, decides to drive for Uber, save her money, move in with her mom, and now runs a scuba diving company. Okay. Like, there's no women who run scuba diving companies, right? So I'm going to be showcasing those stories later, because they really showed me that it is possible to, just look around at your life and go, yeah, this is not for me, and I deserve fucking better. Question is, though, from that moment of aha, from that moment of realization, what are the tangible, actual steps to getting there? Because it's one thing for me to go, oh man, I feel motivated. Well, feeling motivated isn't enough to actually make change. You need to, day in, day out, the consistency of the commitment to that change. My first thought was, let me pitch this as a book, okay, of how do you reinvent yourself. I had written already a book, and my publisher said in the contract, said if I had an idea for a second book, they have what's called first right of refusal, meaning I have to go to them first. So I wrote, I think, a 50 or 60 page proposal for the second book about how do you reinvent your life. It was rejected. It was rejected. And let me tell you, I was not expecting that. No, because I was, as much as I was self flagellating and unmotivated, like, still thought I was pretty good. They told me I wasn't an expert on reinvention. And you know what? They kind of weren't wrong. I hadn't really reinvented my life. I mean, throughout my life, I'd had a series of reinventions, but I was writing this book because I wanted to learn. Like, yeah, I wasn't coming at it from a place of expertise. I was coming at it from a place of desperation, of needing to learn this information and hoping that they would pay me to go and find this information and write about it. But here's what I'm really, really grateful for. I'm grateful for the rejection because, first of all, it turns out I wasn't devastated, that I had done enough therapy work, which I'll talk about in other lives of different modalities I've experienced, but I wasn't destroyed. So for the little credit as I had been giving myself, right? I've lost motivation. Who am I? I don't know what I want to do. Turns out I'd actually built my inner worth enough to the place of when I got a major rejection that I was upset about it, but not destroyed. I felt my feelings. Like, I also made sure that I didn't jump to silver lining, right? Again, you got to give yourself that space to grieve and process, right? Which I did. But I still was like, okay, redirection, right? If it's not this, now what? And I'm going to give credit to my beautiful wife, Ashley. She said, you have 50 or 60 pages of a book proposal that they're rejecting. Use it to make a boot camp, baby. Yeah, that's what we did. That's what we did. So we ran a boot camp. 37 amazing women participated in how do you reinvent your life? How do you live an alive life? Okay. And I had an aha moment, which was, man, let's just look at everything we do as practice, as an experiment, as a learning experience. I know that sounds cliche as fuck, but I literally did that, right? I created a book proposal because I had questions about life reinvention for myself. I was doing all of this research anyway to figure out how to remotivate myself. Might as well go and help other people / make money off of it, right? Book rejection happens. Why would I throw this out? No, use it. And not only run the boot camp and go, well, I have to be an expert to run a boot camp. No, look at the boot camp as a little petri dish, right? It's beta testing. I felt confident enough in what I was presenting that there would be value to be had from everybody. But I also knew that whatever happened in that boot camp was going to inform my next steps, whether it was an improved book proposal, another boot camp, or something else completely. Now, this brings us to today. And I'm going to share a couple of, and I'll go more into detail if you want about the elements of an alive life and what I learned, in really examining what does it take to take command of your circumstances and to make change. But there were a few things that I learned in this process that were so, so, so important to me. I have to share them with you today. Okay. All right. The first one was, and I know you're going to roll your eyes because you've heard this from so many other people, me too, but it does work. Everyday journal. You know why? Because it's going to get you into the habit of writing like shit. If you are somebody who's a perfectionist and you feel like everything you do has to be really, really good, maybe every day write some bad stuff, write bad poetry, okay? So it is getting into the habit of just being out there in the world and kind of sucking. Wow, that's great. Second reason to journal is it is showing your intuition that they are welcome to appear. And there is something about hand to paper for me that my intuition unveils itself. And in my terrible writing, God, and also my terrible handwriting, that's part of the problem though. I can't actually read what I wrote. Yikes. But as I write things out, I'm realizing that I'm actually processing my life and it's giving me perspective. Because if I'm trying to figure out who I am and how to motivate myself and how to make change just in my head, I am having old toxic thought narratives, thought processes getting in the way. I don't have perspective. And the only way to get perspective is to get distance, right? Whether it's getting out of your head and putting it on paper, getting a coach, a friend, talking it out, walking down the street with a voice memo, listening to it back. You just have to get your thoughts out of your head and see them somewhere else outside of your body. And then you can begin to see patterns and themes and certain things that just come out of you. You go, whoa, I need to maybe take that more seriously. So, starting with the practice of journaling was everything. Second thing that was everything was IFS. So and in future lives, again, I'm going to go into more detail about different, therapeutic modalities I tried. But really, IFS therapy has been life-changing for me. It stands for Internal Family System. Again, I'll go in more detail later on because we're coming up on the hour. But it's a way of relating to yourself, not as just one person, but you've got lots of parts. And all these parts that you don't quote like, for example, for me, it was the inner critic, the procrastinator. Instead of having this combative relationship with them, like telling my inner critic to shut up, right? Or, oh, I wish I would stop procrastinating, right? The more negative of a relationship you have with yourself, the harder it's going to be to not only make change, but really thrive in this world. You want to develop a loving, compassionate relationship with all of your parts and not a bullshit one of like, oh, I love you. No, like you have to learn from your parts. It's actually seeing how everything inside of you has wisdom for you. Again, I'll go more to on about how I did that, but starting to relate to myself with compassion and curiosity, game changing. And then, now that we're on the hour, I'm going to tell you the aha moments that led to starting these daily lives. Wow, this hour has gone by really fast. Okay. So, a few weeks ago, well, I should just mention I made a lot of change in my life to get to a place where I am not running off of adrenaline. I have like a sustained, grounded energy because so much of how I operated in my life came from just like panic, which of course would lead to burnout. We don't like that, right? I needed a new way of working. I'm a recovering workaholic. I'm a recovering perfectionist. Okay, so I needed a new way of sort of being in the world. But there was one thing that I also needed to do that I was just not doing, which was creating consistent content. Because I love creating content, but if I'm alone in my room doing it, I'm not incentivized to do it. I didn't realize that I needed a live component until this is the aha moment I had. I was in person doing an event in New York maybe like 2 months ago, or I guess last month. And it was the first time I'd been in person in a while, about 200 people. I gave a speech. And at first, it felt kind of weird, people coming up to me saying, "Oh, you're amazing." I felt really hesitant. It was like my body didn't want to accept the compliments because I knew that if I let the compliments in, I would need the compliments. That was part of the issue I realized when the pandemic happened and all live events stopped. And I wasn't getting that kind of live feedback from you all. I didn't know who I was, that I so much had constructed my identity and my sense of self and self-worth from other people. Okay. That's so dangerous. So dangerous. We should be deriving a sense of self, not from feedback, because feedback can change, right? But so I go to this event and I'm like, oh, I don't want to let the compliments in. And then afterwards, for days, I craved the compliments. I would refresh, so embarrassing, but it is what it is. Refreshing my inbox over and over again. Did anybody write me? Did anybody say they liked my speech? Of course they did. People said that they loved it, but people telling me they loved it was not enough. I felt like an addict, like, give me more, give me more, give me more. And honestly, it made me physically ill. It almost felt like I was eating candy, right? That kind of like nauseous sugar high. And so I go to my therapist and I say, I am so embarrassed that after 2 years of like deep therapy work, of trying to reevaluate, getting self satisfaction and self worth from inside and not from others, no, I still need it. And I feel like that makes me a bad person because my whole thing about Ladies Get Paid is wanting to help others. But here I am, my ego wants to be told I'm great. So I'm shaming myself. So not only am I having the desire for feedback and other people loving me, I now am shaming that desire. So now we're dealing with a bunch of stuff. Here's the game changing thing that my therapist said to me that kind of opened up a lot. And this is why I'm doing the lives with you all. She said, "What was your whole point in starting Ladies Get Paid?" And as I started to answer her, she said, "I actually want you to replace the word women with yourself, because why you wanted to create Ladies Get Paid, it's not about other people, it's about what you want to give to yourself." So here's what I did. So I originally was going to say, my mission in Ladies Get Paid and what I do here is to help women connect with themselves and with each other. Now I have to replace the word women with me. My mission in starting Ladies Get Paid is to connect to myself and with other women. Whoa, I have goosebumps. I don't know if anyone else feels like that's game changing. The thing that you want to create for others is actually what you want to create for yourself. Or at least if you frame it in that way, you can then decide, is this actually true? Does this feel in my bones like it's right for me? Wow. So then, if my deep mission in all of this is to connect to myself and to other women, then why the hell would I judge myself for desperately wanting people to tell me how my speech was? It's part of the experience of wanting to connect. Oh, it also meant that I really, really needed to take more seriously that deep desire. So that when you say, like, here's what I want to do, or, you sort of make these statements, or I guess I shouldn't say you, I'll say me. When I make these statements, because I've been saying this for so long, saying something over and over again doesn't mean that you've really let it sink in. Okay. What does it mean to connect with oneself and other people? And really to make that mission front and center in a much more serious way than I'd ever done before. That, coupled with the need to create consistent content that I was just not motivating myself to do, the aha moment is, do it live, girl. Do it live. Why sit in my room making content that I then have to edit and put online, which, by the way, adds extra pressure of like perfection when, as I said earlier, recovering workaholic and recovering perfectionist over here. Just be myself. Just be myself. I mean, we'll see how this goes, right? It's like Daily Live is canceled tomorrow. This went terribly. No, it's also part of the whole let's practice, let's experiment. What's going to come out of this? This is just the first hour of 90 days of doing this. What is going to happen? Like, what stories will come, again, not just from me, from you all, the people you meet on here, the feedback I get. We can create something so monumental that will literally change the world, but we won't know what that is unless we just put ourselves out there in some way. Let that be my closing to you. Please put yourself out there. You do not need to do it in the way that I am doing it at all. At all. It could just be, remember, I started Ladies Get Paid by just sharing my story with some friends. That's it. It was just by email. You could just tell one person that you're struggling. That is profound for you and for them. It is creating a connection between you that so many of us have lost through the pandemic, and also just with kind of social media in general. Like, we think we're connecting, but are we really? Are we really? Okay. So there was a lot of information that I threw at you here just to kind of wrap it up in a like, what are the major takeaways and lessons from this whole thing? Is if you are feeling overwhelmed by life, when you're feeling lost, or there's just your circumstances are not as you want them to be, start by journaling. 5 minutes every day. Get a nice little journal, just write terribly in it. Okay, there's that. Second, go read and connect with people who have changed their lives. Okay, don't let that intimidate you. You're going to just challenge yourself with one little thing to take away from their life. Okay, again, whether you're listening to me or you're reading a book or following somebody on social media, and they share a piece that's helpful to you, write that down. Okay, write that down. There's that. And then later on, we're going to talk more about this, but really start to take yourself seriously. Your deep, deep desires, they don't just matter for you, they matter for all of us. Because again, in me doing this work today, right now, like, this is all self-serving. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I'm doing this because, like, this is therapeutic. But maybe I've said something that actually changed somebody's life here. So I think you owe it to yourself to put yourself out there for the rest of us. We have way more impact on each other than we realize. So, last thing I'm going to say is, well, actually, no, there isn't a last thing. Last thing is, Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on LinkedIn, Ladies Get Paid, me, at Claire Gets Paid on Instagram, Facebook. Follow us on all the channels because the recordings are going to go up here Monday through Friday, noon Pacific time, so 3 p.m. Eastern. I'm committing to doing a live. I'm going to share stories like I was married to a man, left him for a woman. Didn't know I was a lesbian, definitely am. I'm going to share that. Now that story, it's not about sexuality or, any of that. It's about getting in touch with yourself and having the guts to actually honor it. It's universal. I'm going to tell stories about when we were sued for gender discrimination by a group of men's rights activists. Oh, wait, how that then led to my book deal. Why writing my book led to my first major breakdown with imposter syndrome. How I picked myself back up from that. Okay. What it's like to live in a family where everybody went to Yale, but I definitely didn't get in, and I'm the black sheep and have a big chip on my shoulder. Now, save that for therapy. What else? I mean, stories on goddamn stories. You will hear them. But again, it's not just about me. I am just starting it. I want your stories. Check out ladiesgetpaid.com. Go to our blog. You're going to see a list of topics of stories that we're currently soliciting for. Call me, leave me a voicemail, or send an email with your story. We will share it. We will make it anonymous. I do want to know who you are so I can get in touch, because maybe you don't want to be anonymous and we could do a live together. Who knows? But in sharing your story, do know that we will protect all identifying details. The point being is that just being ourselves is such a brave thing to do. It does change lives. I've seen it happen. Ladiesgetpaid.com. You'll also see our video library. You'll see how to join our community. It is free. We also have an upgrade to getting access to all 100 hours of our video library, plus group coaching with me every month. You can also go to ladiesgetpaid.com/book or wherever books are sold for this book. So what are we going to talk about tomorrow? Okay, so tomorrow's live again starts at noon Pacific time. I think we're going to talk about setbacks and charting our lives through all the shitty ass things we experienced. Okay, all the disruptions and devastations in our lives. How do you find the opportunity? Because when I did this in my own life, and I wrote out everything from my parents got a divorce when I was 8 years old. What did it teach me? Right? I found all the bad things that I experienced, and I charted out all the great things that I've experienced or done, direct correlation between them. But how do you actually do that? How do you turn a setback into something incredible? How do you find the gold in it? How do you use it to propel you forward? Right? How do you create your own luck? So much there. So that's tomorrow. So come and join for that. I think Thursday, I'm going to talk about learning how to let go of control, because I'm getting knocked up. That's the other thing. Yeah, my wife and I are having a baby. I just screamed that into the microphone. So if it was quite loud for you and you take a step back, I understand. I'm not offended. Yeah, so ovulating this week, and looks like Thursday might be the day, happening at 8:30 in the morning. But I've committed to doing the live with you all. So you're going to get me after baby knocked up, and we're going to do a little moment together of pray for the baby. No, we're going to talk about, again, because it's not about the baby, just like it's never about the subject you think it is. It's about the process of trying to understand it. Meaning, when you make a plan, like having a baby, wanting to have a baby, what's that quote, right? You make a plan, God laughs. Okay. So we also have to learn how to let go. You do the best you can and you say whatever happens, happens. And then Friday, I think we're going to talk about relationship with rest, maybe, or I might try to convince my wife to come on and we can have a conversation together. By the way, these are whatever you want them to be. We want to hear from you. So, spread the word, tag us, ask questions, DM me, call me. Again, it's on. I'm just going to read the number out loud for you real quick so that you know where to call in to send us your story. 310-844-6731 or hello@ladiesgetpaid.com. We're looking for stories of getting fired or losing your job, salary negotiation, burnout, learning to embrace your worth, relationship with money, trusting your intuition, things that keep you going, and dealing with debt. All that sounded good. You were in the right place, my friends. So come on back tomorrow and every day, Monday through Friday. I love you all so freaking much. You're the best. Oh man, I don't want to end this. Okay, this means that I'm on the right path, I think, for myself. Again, whatever this turns into, this is the fun part of letting go. But I'm feeling good. I hope you are too. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. All right. Love you. Bye.